LA gets the win thanks to who else, guys? Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald. Kupp gets the MVP, but how are you feeling if you had, say, a Donald MVP ticket? It was plus 1,400 on the DK Sportsbook yesterday, Jeff. When we talked about this last week, it was plus 1,600.
You should feel like a dope for betting a defensive player to win MVP. We told you all week. Don't bet the defensive players to win MVP. You weren't getting good value with Aaron Donald. I don't care what anybody says. Look what happened. The guy had a great game. He basically made a game-saving play at the end to win. What happened? You got nothing. You got nothing for it because Cooper Kupp is also on the Rams and also made the same plays. And whenever there's a tie to the runner, they're going to give it to the offensive player. So, yeah, I mean, I don't feel bad for you. You don't deserve anything. You bet a defensive player to win Super Bowl MVP in a game that's dominated by offensive players and studs and stars like Cooper Kupp out there making great catches. Aaron Donald's fantastic. He could have easily won it. He was on the same page as Cooper Kupp. They're never going to give it to him in that situation, though. So don't bet defensive players to win Super Bowl MVP.
All right, Pearce, how do you feel about this one? When Donald gave Joe Burrow that hard but legal shove out of bounds in the third quarter, it was the first stat he recorded in the box score.
No one cares. No one cares about Aaron Donald. And Jeff wasn't harsh enough. If you made that sucker bet, you're a loser. You knew not to pick a defensive player. You had no chance. He needed, and we talked about this last week, for a defensive player to win MVP. And it's not an MVP, by the way. If you thought that this was literally for the most valuable player, then you probably had no business making the bet anyway. It's a popularity bet. It goes to the most recognizable player with a big game. It's like a TV title in professional wrestling. It's not really going to the guy who has the biggest impact, or otherwise it would be the award for the player with the biggest impact. That's not what this is. It's a popularity contest. Kupp won. And you knew that he could have a lifetime performance on defense, and you would also need no one on offense at all to have a good game. And that was just very unlikely with the two offenses setting up. You knew that someone was going to be above average and end up winning. Maybe, if the end of the game plays out a little differently, but whatever. You knew you weren't going to win.
All right, Matt, let's not act like he shouldn't have been in consideration, though, because after that mini fight, the beast was awoken, finished with a 17.5 pressure rate, 4 tackles, 3 quarterback hits, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, had the final 2 game-clinching plays.
Yeah, I mean, I do like disagreeing with these guys in general, but for this one, there's just no way. I think we all talked about it all week that, sure, Aaron Donald had a chance, and maybe if one of his sacks turns into a fumble, maybe he gets a touchdown somewhere, that was the scenario you needed. But we were all on the same page that just the odds were not high enough for that scenario. If I'm surprised about anything, it's that Stafford didn't win. I kind of thought that could have gone either way between Stafford and Kupp. But I think what ultimately sealed it for Kupp is the fact that he scored the game-winning touchdown twice on the final drive. He got absolutely rocked, and then it didn't count on the first touchdown pass that he caught. And then he just went right back out there and scored again. I think after that whole sequence, it was at least somewhat obvious that Kupp was going to win. I think it could have gone to Stafford, but yeah, there was no way. If you were sitting on an Aaron Donald ticket, you just didn't really understand what this MVP award was about, which is the player who kind of was the most popular on the winning team and was the face of the game, so to speak, for them. And that's never going to be a defensive player unless they do something totally miraculous. And Donald played extremely well and might have actually been the Rams' best player, but he came up well short of those standards.
Could have gone with the officials there on that last drive for the Rams. Could have gone with the Bengals defense as well. But Stafford and Kupp, guys, engineered an all-time great drive to win the damn thing, overcoming a few interceptions by LA signal caller. On the other side, though, you have Burrow, who gets sacked 7 times, tying a Super Bowl record and missing the over on his passing totals. What was your biggest takeaway between the 2 quarterbacks last night and their performances, Pearce?
Well, speaking of the officials, Stafford had a pretty ugly game, and it would have been a lot worse if he doesn't get bailed out on that 3rd and long inside the goal line. You don't get that phantom call, 4th and long in the red zone. That's a low probability shot. They turn the ball over on downs. He doesn't get that final touchdown. He doesn't have nearly the numbers that we expect. 7 yards per pass attempt, 2 interceptions. And we knew Burrow was going to struggle with the offensive line. We knew they would get a couple good drives, but I don't think there was any surprises here. There's some pretty mild, moderate performances by both quarterbacks. They didn't absolutely kill their team, but neither one of them really was the driving force. Sure, Stafford led that final drive, but as you mentioned, boy, there was a lot of yellow flags there at the end that really helped the hometown team win.
Yeah, Matt, I don't think this was like an all-time great Super Bowl or anything. Like, neither team really played as well as they could have. But talking just quarterbacks here, what stood out to you between Stafford and Joe Burrow?
Yeah, it was really just how normal they played. It's kind of what Pearce is saying. Like, this is basically what we expected from this game. Stafford made some big plays, and he also made some mistakes, and I think overall he was pretty average. Burrow was probably bad if you actually call the T. Higgins penalty that should have been offensive pass interference on the long touchdown where Jalen Ramsey's face mask was clearly grabbed. I mean, if that play is called correctly, sure, we can argue about the refs at the end of the game, but like that was a lot more egregious than the defensive holding on Cooper Kupp. I think the Kupp play probably shouldn't have been a penalty. It can be debated. It was close. The Higgins play is not debatable. Like, that was clearly offensive pass interference. And it wasn't even a good throw by Burrow on the play. Higgins just made a crazy move to not get called for that somehow. Like, overall, I think Burrow played below average. Stafford was about average. And yeah, I guess that's a standout, maybe. I don't think there were too many people expecting that. It was sort of the way I thought it would go. But I did think both of them might have – I thought they would maybe play a little bit better than they did. It wasn't really a great game from either of them.
Yeah, Jeff, do you agree with that? You probably expected a little more out of these two dudes?
Stafford had the exact kind of game that I thought he would. He made I'll give him credit. I mean, the guy still has a live arm. But I mean, this is still the same Matthew Stafford that was in Detroit. He's just on a better team. He makes great throws, breathtaking throws, and then he makes silly mistakes. His interceptions were terrible. I mean, the one in the end zone was awful. And I mean, Pearce said, like, I'm sorry, like, that was not a holding call. That wasn't even. I mean, if you're calling that a holding call, that's flag football at that point. So. Absolutely got bailed out at the end of the game. The Rams got bailed out again. I mean, I think we could talk about that, how this team just has essentially gotten bailed out in like 3 of their 4 wins in the playoffs. But that's what the Bengals are too. I mean, the Bengals aren't like that good a team. They couldn't execute at the end. And yeah, Joe Burrow really didn't do anything spectacular either. But I think the thing you have to, the one sort of saving grace with the Joe Burrow performance is he was going up against the Rams defense, which to me is still like the more elite unit than the Bengals. Like, he was under pressure. He had the worst O-line. So Burrow, you can kind of give a slight pass to. He didn't have a good game, but I still think that, you give him a bit of a pass there. But I mean, Stafford did just enough to win. He needed to get a bit lucky again, but he did. And that's just football, man.
Well, besides an inactive Vernon Hargreaves coming out of nowhere to celebrate an interception with his Bengals teammates, like, who was your biggest surprise in Super Bowl 56, Matt?
Yeah, I guess it was the fact that Cam Akers just kept getting the ball. Like, there was nothing in this game that was
unreal.
There wasn't a positive player performance that really shocked me. T. Higgins is a really good receiver. I wasn't blown away or anything by the fact that he was good, and Jamar Chase was going to get more attention than him just because of how good of a season Jamar Chase had. But the Rams just kept giving Cam Akers the ball, and Henderson played really well in the first half, and there were a couple really good catches he made. So I guess it's one that the Rams, they ran the ball as much as they did in general because the running game couldn't get anything going. And then 2, that they kept Akers in when it was clear that he just doesn't have the explosiveness right now. Maybe the shoulder's bothering him. Maybe he's still not fully back from the Achilles injury. But yeah, what stood out to me was just I couldn't believe the play calling, although they did finally remedy it on the final drive with the Cooper Kupp end around, which I thought was the best play call of the season from Sean McVay. So they finally figured it out, but for a while there, it was looking pretty bleak for them.
Yeah, I mean, smart move by McVay there. You go to your best player in like the biggest moment of the game. Who was the biggest surprise in your eyes, Jeff?
Look, find someone in this world who loves you as much as Sean McVay loves Cam Akers, man. Bryson Hawkins, like, what? I mean, I swear, this guy just got rolled out of like a creative player on the Rams sidelines after Kendall Blanton went down. I mean, I talked about Blanton and potentially being like a really good fantasy value, and obviously he got hurt. But I mean, Hawkins, again, it just exposed the Rams a little bit. He shows up with 4 catches. Most people probably didn't even know he was active, and it just kind of exposed one weakness on the Bengals was they don't cover tight ends very well. They don't cover that middle position of the field very well at all. And it kind of got exposed a little bit. I mean, Hawkins made some plays for them. I mean, they needed guys like Skoranek and Hawkins to just make a couple catches once Odell went down, and they came through. And honestly, that kind of is a bit of an underrated story of this game, just them being able to move the chains with those guys. So Bryson Hawkins, to me, biggest surprise performance of this Super Bowl.
All right, Pearce, what about you?
there really wasn't a true big surprise when we think about that. Like, oh, who's the guy that came out of nowhere and completely changed the face of the game? There was guys that surprised us slightly and had good performances, but for me, the biggest surprise, which really isn't a positive, was when Odell Beckham got injured. He was looking pretty good. Jeff was with me. We didn't think he was going to have a good game at all. But the way that game started, it looked like it was going to be the Beckham show. If he would have stayed healthy, they may have completely blown out the Bengals. Him and Kupp together would have probably been unstoppable. That was a huge thing that kept the Bengals in this game. So that was the shocking moment when he went down. It didn't even look that serious, and he never came back. So he surprised me the way they played, and then it was surprising to see him go down.
Yeah, time for you three now. This is going to be my favorite part of the show. Time for you three to take a victory lap. So I want all of you to kind of sit back and relax and allow me, exhale. Pearce, let's start with you. On Friday, you gave us the same game parlay that included Stafford, 2 interceptions, and that was a late addition to this. Mixon over 64.5 rushing yards, under 39.5 receiving yards, Higgins over 74.5 yards, and under Cam Akers 69.5 rushing yards for a nice plus 2,200 payout. Didn't really have to sweat that one, did you?
No, it was pretty easy. I thought I was pretty confident with that pick. I also wanted to add that if you read my DK Nation articles this week, my NBA picks went 4-1, and my NASCAR picks went 4-0 last week. So let's do a couple more victory laps while we're at it.
All right, I love it. And do not forget, you will have competition from Jeff this week on the NASCAR DK Nation circuit. So just, look over your shoulder there, dude. Speaking of Jeff, hey, dude, you were huge on T. Higgins all week. 2 touchdowns, hitting the century mark in yards. That's a good thing. Dude was in line for MVP. So please take a bow for us.
I mean, look, T. Higgins, we definitely, Pearce and I both mentioned we liked Higgins. I kind of like Boyd as well. Higgins definitely paid off for us. I mean, I got to admit, though, I mean, you guys didn't mention, my Scotty Scheffler went from the Phoenix Open, but also, look, the Jason Tatum 3-pointer prop hit. He hit 4 3-pointers against the Hawks. The Rams only had 3 total touchdowns. That's plus 160. That was, like I said, that was my favorite bet of the entire Super Bowl. And I think you laughed at it too, Emerson. So, yeah, I'm going to victory lap that.
Yeah, I did laugh at it because he has sucked recently shooting threes. But once again, you proved that you are the smartest man on this team. By the way, side note, the Rams attempting the Philly special without Nick Foles. How sad was that?
It's just pathetic. Absolutely.
Maddie.
What are you doing? It's embarrassing.
Right? Maddie, you were fading the Rams running game like all week. Brilliant outlook by you, but you had to have thought that they would get more than 30 yards from their running backs, right? I mean, Cooper Kupp had almost like 25% of 30 yards with a 7-yard rush.
Yeah, I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure if I even mentioned the rushing success of the Rams whatsoever. Almost all of my analysis was just about the distribution of the workload. Like, I don't even know if I even thought about if they would do well or not. It had almost nothing to do with that. I just didn't see any way that Akers was going to play every down. And the 16.5 rushing attempts line was basically dependent on him being the every down back. We saw Henderson get in there early. Michelle didn't play as much as I thought he would, but that was largely due to Henderson. So, yeah, I mean, this kind of worked out. I also had over 4.5 Rams to have a rushing attempt. That was a fun one that paid like 2-1. I think we had to sweat that one till the end for the Cooper Kupp end around. So maybe I'd kind of forgotten about that one until I checked the box score after the game. But I was happy to hit that one. And then the weirdest moment of the game for me that I won on was Johnny Hecker plus 700 to have a touchback. We got that one late in the second quarter. So overall, it was a nice game.
Yeah. Did you just respectfully decline taking a victory lap with the running game?
Maybe.
Yeah. I like that about you.
I mean, I'll take a victory lap for Matt. He was the one who pointed out that Akers' attempts was way overpriced at the beginning of last week.
Yeah.
And he's the one who got me on it. So to me, that was like the most mispriced prop on the board. Cam Akers at 16.5. That was on the board all week. We talked about it. I just stole Matt's idea and basically talked about it all week.
It was 14.5 Super Bowl warning, so we did something. Someone caught on eventually.
Matt, thank you for helping Jeff. Because of that, he can put food on the table for his family this week. You saved Jeff's life and his marriage. All right, guys, there's no time like the present, so let's head on over to the DK Sportsbook, where we've got the Chiefs and the Bills at plus 400 to win the AFC next season, with the Bengals at plus 650. Rams are the favorites in the NFC at plus 450. Your initial thoughts on odds for each conference here? Is there anyone like too high, too low, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, look, the AFC, I think is a pretty loaded conference. I think the Bengals at plus 650. They're just they're the definition of overvalued right now. Obviously, coming off the Super Bowl. I don't know why the Broncos are plus 1,000. I assume that's just on some Aaron Rodgers news. But the value is probably looking at teams like the Colts, Chargers, and yes, even maybe the Titans, if they can perhaps get rid of the Ryan Tannehill anchor contract. But that's where the value is live for me in the AFC. The NFC is a lot different story. I mean, we've got the Aaron Rodgers news. I'm not going to take the Rams again. You're just the definition of overvalued right now. But you've got teams down there who could certainly bounce back quickly. It's going to be a much weaker division in the NFC. I think you can go really deep in that division and look at teams like maybe even the Vikings, because if Aaron Rodgers leaves, I mean, there's like a power vacuum in that conference, in my opinion, and it could be wide open for some good value there on the NFC side.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were implying like Aaron Rodgers doing a Brett Favre thing and leaving Green Bay and eventually ending up like in Minnesota. Ooh. I
was not, but that could happen, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it certainly could. Hey, anything could happen, right? Pearce, who do you think? Whose odds do you think may be too short, too long?
I think the Chargers stands out to me at plus 2,500. The biggest problem with them last season, well, two problems. They were inconsistent. You never really could count on them. But you look at what the Rams did this season. They got a little bit more consistent during the playoffs and had a pretty favorable road in the playoffs, and they won the Super Bowl. So the Chargers, if they could have just got into the playoffs, who knows what could have happened. They need to improve their running defense. But really, that is it. The secondary is fine. Their offensive line could use a little bit more of an upgrade. But they've got all the weapons. They've got a quarterback that's only going to get better. That team is right there. And at 2,500, and in a division, I know you still got the Chiefs there, but we've seen wildcard teams make their way through the playoffs. So Chargers are who I am looking at early on.
Yeah, it's Super Bowl odds for the Chargers, by the way, plus 2,500. Same odds as the Patriots there. Oh, and the Cardinals and the Colts. Matty, whose odds kind of pop for you here?
Yeah, the team that stands out to me as the opposite of the Bengals, the team that is really good, I think, but just couldn't get it together this season, is the Baltimore Ravens, who dealt with, I think, more injuries than just about anyone. And if this team is healthy next year, if Lamar Jackson's healthy, 10-1 for the AFC, 20-1 for the Super Bowl. Like, I think they're as good as anyone. And I'm not sure if too many people would have even disagreed with that before the injuries started piling up for them. The Ravens beat the Chiefs to start this season. If you just looked at what their betting lines were for their games, like they were getting a lot of respect game by game, and then Lamar got banged up, and then they basically lost their entire defense. So if the Ravens get it together, they're a team that seems to draft well. I don't know how much we can read into that as a predictive thing, but it seems like the Ravens have done well in off seasons, and it just, to me, it's the buy low spot. Like they underachieved by more than just about anyone this past season.
Yeah, as long as they get those contract negotiations banged out with Lamar, right? Because you don't want that hanging over your head. Let's get to our Super Cut sensation. To no one's surprise, our Super Fantasy Player of the Week, presented by Super Cups, is none other than Cooper Kupp. His 8 catches, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. Look at that line. 7 rushing yards, giving him a Super Bowl best 30 DK fantasy points, capping off a historic, legendary season from this bona fide fantasy stud, winning Offensive Player of the Year and Super Bowl MVP. Geoff, who's in a good position to be the breakout fantasy star next season?
Man, I mean, it's a good question, but I'm going to go with A.J. Brown. I think that A.J. Brown is a player who we have seen dominate like good cornerbacks, bad cornerbacks, and he's really just carried that Tennessee Titans passing offense to the point where he's like been the only player in the game for them at points. So I think he's a player who could get insane targeting, just like Cooper Kupp. He's able to dominate good cornerbacks and bad cornerbacks. And I think he's on a team in Tennessee who's still going to be throwing in spots because their defense still is kind of streaky. So I'm going to go with A.J. Brown next year. If this guy can stay healthy and on the field, he's got a very good shot of being like a top 3 fantasy player at his position.
Pearce, what do you think next year? Who could be the breakout fantasy star?
Well, if Aaron Rodgers goes to Minnesota, then I might have to target the receivers there, but that's a bit of an if. I'll go with what we know for certain. That's Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are still going to be there. They're at the beginning of their careers. While the Ravens' offense is surely going to get better next season, the Steelers might improve. The defenses in the AFC North are still pretty rough. The AFC probably really isn't that great of a division, and I can see Jamar Chase in year 2 absolutely exploding every single week. We probably haven't even seen all the different dimensions of his game yet. We've seen the big plays, but what happens when he starts to get 10, 15 targets per game? It's going to be pretty insane.
Matt, who has potential to be the breakout fantasy star next year?
I'm just going to stick to the tight end script that I think most people are familiar with, and Kyle Pitts, where rookie tight ends just tend to not be that good. And yet, despite that knowledge, everyone just kind of assumed that Kyle Pitts was good enough to break through that. And he had his moments, but clearly, like, he needed more time to become a reliable NFL receiver. And that really is what he is. Like, Kyle Pitts is called a tight end, but he's basically a wide receiver. So maybe that's why people thought he would be better as a rookie, but still he has to know how to block. He has to know how to run over the middle, different than college. And by next year, I think that he'll have most of that figured out. So even if Matt Ryan's his quarterback, I think Kyle Pitts still likely is up there with the other tight ends this year, where this past season he was more in the second or third tier. I think we see him turn into an elite player next year.